Clint Eastwood, who is super old now, like 95, sat in his special room. This room was filled with movie scripts, photos, and memories from almost 70 years of work. The famous director, actor, and boss finally decided to tell a big secret. He thought about things for a moment, and it shocked everyone, even the super connected people in Hollywood. Eastwood shared something really amazing. Tucked away in a fancy leather book kept secret for years was a long list. It had 14 names, 14 actors from the old days of Hollywood. Eastwood had seen them himself doing really mean, planned out, and bad things. He felt he had to write it all down before he passed away. These weren't just small fights or being jealous rivals. These were written stories of being cruel, tricky, and planning to ruin other people. Eastwood had spent many years watching from movie sets, from editing rooms, and from boss meetings. He saw how powerful people used their power like a weapon against people who were less powerful. He kept quiet for years to protect his own career, to protect his friends, and to protect the movie business that made him rich and famous. But at 95, with nothing left to lose, he decided that staying quiet was the same as helping the bad guys. It was time to write down what he saw, to say the names of the people who ruined careers, broke people's spirits, and used their jobs in a mean and planned way. Eastwood knew that by not speaking up, he was helping these bad things keep happening. He was letting new victims join a movie world where mean people were protected by money, fame, and a nice public look. He realized that his silence helped the bad people more than the victims. That idea made him finally break his silence after decades of keeping secrets. Who were these people? And what would make one of the best movie minds ever tell such dark truths? What would make someone like Clint Eastwood, a man who spent his whole life inside the safe world of Hollywood, finally speak against people who helped create that world right alongside him? To find out, we must start with the first name on Eastwood's secret list. An actor whose nice guy looks hid a mean, tricky side that few people ever guessed. This first name would show a pattern that would happen again and again on his list. A pattern of planned charm hiding big, nasty meanness. 1. Gene Hackman, the actor of cruelty. Gene Hackman was so talented that movie fans believed every person he played. But Eastwood's secret notes say that Hackman's best acting was when he was not filming. Eastwood wrote that Hackman pretended to be friends with actors who were just starting out. Then, he would slowly ruin their careers once they became people he had to compete against. On one movie set in 1971, Hackman broke a younger actor's gear during practice. This made the actor fail terribly when they actually filmed the scene. When the director asked about the broken gear, Hackman pretended he didn't know. He then quietly spread lies that the younger actor was bad at his job. More than just ruining jobs, Hackman was known for messing with people's minds. He would invite other actors to private dinners. He would learn their secrets and worries. Then he would use that information like a weapon for everyone to see. Eastwood saw Hackman totally crush an actress's confidence. He did this by casually talking about a sad thing from her childhood at a press event. He turned her deepest pain into gossip for the newspapers. What made Hackman especially mean was that he could look like he cared. He would offer friendship to the people he was planning to destroy. This made his betrayals feel even worse for them. Eastwood wrote that Hackman would publicly defend an actor he was secretly hurting. This made people confused about what he really wanted. His victims often couldn't explain exactly what he did wrong. This was because his mean acts were easy to pretend never happened. Eastwood finished his notes on Hackman with a scary thought. The man did not have a feeling of right and wrong, he just had a skill for making others think he did. Behind closed doors, Hackman was cold and calm about the damage he caused. He saw the movie business as a zero-sum game, where everyone else's failure directly helped him get ahead. 2. Hilary Swank, the perfection bully. Hilary Swank's rise in Hollywood looked like a fast and deserved success, but Eastwood wrote about a troubling pattern under her famous rise. Swank had impossibly high rules not for herself but for everyone else. She used being a perfectionist like a weapon to control people. On one movie set, Swank demanded that the extra actors stay in character even between filming. She threatened to fire them if they stopped acting even for a second. She created a feeling of such strong pressure that several crew members had panic attacks. Eastwood noted that Swank's need for perfection was also used on her co-stars. She would intentionally suggest different ways to act out scenes. These suggestions were meant to make her co-stars doubt themselves. She would praise their work publicly but then secretly tell the producers they needed to be replaced. Her mind games were so clever that her victims often doubted their own abilities. They would wonder if her mean comments were actually true. Swank also had a complicated way of controlling things through her movie company. She would hire and fire helpers very quickly. This created a constant stream of stressed-out workers who were afraid of making her angry. One assistant said she worked 18-hour days with almost no warning. When she tried to ask for better hours, Swank threatened to ruin her career before it even started. Eastwood wrote that Swank would purposefully give impossible tasks. Then she would use the unavoidable failure as a reason for super harsh criticism. This was meant to destroy their self-worth. She kept detailed records of mistakes, even tiny ones. She would bring them up months or years later to say they were always bad at their jobs. Her way was a planned mind attack, hidden by the idea of being a great professional. 3. Richard Harris, the drunk money. Richard Harris acted like the troubled artist that Hollywood loved. But Eastwood's notes show a man who used alcohol not to feel better, but as a weapon. Harris drank on purpose before filming with actors he didn't like. He used being drunk as an excuse to yell terrible things at them on the set. During a movie in 1979, Harris arrived drunk for a scene with an actress. He called her deeply mean and personal names. Later, he said he didn't remember doing it. His angry, drunk fits happened off the set too. Harris would go to fancy clubs. There he would yell and embarrass movie people he thought were his rivals or threats. Eastwood wrote about a time Harris cornered a movie boss at a party. In front of everyone, he told fake, bad stories about him. He ruined the man's good name that same night. Harris's meanness was worse because he refused to take the blame. He would say sorry for what he did. But at the same time, he would suggest his victims were too sensitive or too mean for being angry. This trick made it almost impossible for his victims to get help or justice. They were made to look like troublemakers who were making a big deal out of nothing. What made Harris really dangerous was his charm. When he was sober, he was fun and smart. This made his drunk cruelty even more shocking to people who saw it. Eastwood wrote that Harris had a special pattern. He would start fights on purpose. Then he would blame the alcohol for his actions. This let him do planned mean things while having an easy way to deny it. The alcohol was his mask, his excuse, and his permission to be the person he really was deep down. 4. Eli Wallach, the master trickster. Eli Wallach's career lasted many years. During that time, he created a reputation as a very skilled and focused actor. However, Eastwood saw clever trickery hidden beneath that nice image. Wallach would form very close friendships with younger actors. He would act like a wise teacher and trusted friend. He would gain their full trust, learning their dreams, fears, and weak spots. Once he had all their secrets, he would slowly hurt their self-confidence. He would suggest their dreams were not real or their talents were too small. Eastwood wrote that Wallach especially enjoyed hurting actors who had real talent. He seemed to see their big goals as a personal threat. One young actor who Wallach was mentoring became so convinced he was worthless that he tried to kill himself. The problem was quietly fixed away from the public eye. Wallach then continued his career without being hurt. Besides hurting people one-on-one, Wallach created complicated plans to hurt movie projects. He would convince movie bosses that scripts needed huge last-minute changes. Then he would sabotage the rewrites. He would suggest casting actors he knew would fail. Then when they did fail, he would make himself look like the only one who could save the movie. His tricks were meant to make him seem essential, while making everyone else seem disposable. Eastwood noted that Wallach was especially good at playing the long game. He would keep up seemingly good relationships for years. Then he would suddenly use the trust he had built up like a weapon. His victims found themselves alone. They couldn't turn to the mentor who betrayed them. They couldn't understand the mind game of being ruined by someone who claimed to support them. 5. Lee Van Cleef, the scary bully. Lee Van Cleef's intimidating look on screen was not just acting. Eastwood wrote that Van Cleef's huge size was used off-screen as a tool of real fear. Van Cleef would use his tall body to purposefully scare people. He would stand too close during talks, using body moves meant to make people nervous. On one movie set, Van Cleef started a fight with a production assistant he thought was rude. He began a mind game of torment. He found reasons to get into the assistant's personal space. He made hidden threats disguised as jokes. The assistant eventually quit. They couldn't stand the fear they felt every day. Van Cleef's meanness was also used to undermine directors and producers when he disagreed with their movie choices. Instead of talking about his worries like a professional, he would work in secret. He would get other actors to support his opinion. He created small rebellions that looked like helpful group talks. He used others' fear of his physical presence to force them to agree. Eastwood noted that Van Cleef never needed to be truly violent. The threat alone, carried in his staring eyes and careful words, was enough to control those around him. His reputation came before him. Many actors asked to work with other directors rather than face his intimidation. Eastwood wrote that Van Cleef felt a special satisfaction in terrifying those he thought were less important than him. He seemed to enjoy the power difference. He liked how people scrambled to avoid him. He liked how conversations would get quiet when he walked into a room. For Van Cleef, being in charge was not a side effect of his personality. It was the whole point. The 6. Sandra Locke, the sneaky leech. Sandra Locke's relationship with Clint Eastwood was famous gossip in Hollywood, but what was hidden was her planned way of getting power through personal relationships. Eastwood wrote that Locke intentionally made her boyfriends depend on her. Then she used that dependency to help her own career. She would act very emotionally fragile while secretly controlling her partner's decisions about her roles and work chances. Locke's tricks went beyond romance and into work relationships. She would befriend female crew members and co-stars. Then she would sabotage them when they became a threat to her own place. She started whisper campaigns questioning their professionalism. She spread lies meant to damage their good names. Eastwood wrote how Locke would get secrets out of others. Then she would use those secrets against them when she needed to. What made Locke especially mean was her "I'm a victim" act. She would present herself as always being wronged, underestimated, and mistreated. This earned her sympathy that she used against the people she said had hurt her. She would make real colleagues look like obstacles to her success. She turned her revenge into a moral fight for what was right. Eastwood noted that Locke understood how power works with cold, clear thought. She would find people who could be friends or targets. Then she would create situations that forced people to show their loyalty or get kicked out of her circle. Her plans to ruin people's reputations were carefully built. She used hand-picked evidence to support her story. She left out any information that might make her version look complicated. 7. Jeff Bridges, the nice guy liar. Jeff Bridges built a reputation as a relaxed, truly nice guy in the movie world. Eastwood's records show a different truth. Bridges kept up an elaborate fake front of friendliness. Meanwhile, he was planning terrible betrayals behind closed doors. On many movie sets, Bridges would offer to help younger actors. Then he would purposefully give them wrong or confusing directions. This was meant to confuse them during the actual filming. Eastwood saw Bridges do what could only be called planned gaslighting. He would deny having conversations that were well known to others. This made people doubt their own memories and sanity. When faced with proof, Bridges would laugh it off as a misunderstanding. He would make himself look like the victim of paranoid or mean accusers. Bridges also showed a special cruelty toward crew members he thought were beneath him. He would demand that specific individuals be removed from projects if they saw him acting less than nice. Those who stayed were kept quiet by hidden threats. The threat was that they would be banned from the industry if they spoke about what they saw. Eastwood noted that Bridges's biggest advantage was also his biggest lie. His public nice guy image was so well built and so widely believed that accusations against him seemed unbelievable. People wanted to believe he was genuinely nice. Bridges used that wish completely. He understood that most people would ignore proof that went against the story they preferred to believe. 8. Matt Damon, the ruthless power climbers. Matt Damon's carefully created image as a good person hides what Eastwood wrote about: ruthless ambition. This ambition was separate from what was right or wrong. Damon systematically got himself into projects by hurting other actors' standings with movie bosses and directors. Eastwood recorded Damon purposefully spreading fake information about other actors' contract talks. He suggested they were asking for too much money. This made movie bosses mad even before meetings started. Damon's cruelty included planned social sabotage. He would befriend actors he was competing against. He would learn their personal details. Then he would plant harmful stories in key news outlets. He was careful to never be directly linked to the source. When these stories came out, he would act outraged on behalf of the hurt actor. He would make himself look like a loyal friend, horrified by the betrayal. Damon also had an exploitative relationship with crew members below his rank. He would demand special treatment while refusing to thank them for their hard work. This created environments where his comfort was put before basic human respect. Eastwood concluded that Damon was a new kind of Hollywood villain, one who understood that a good public relations team could hide any bad thing he did. Eastwood wrote about Damon's special talent for looking innocent. He would create situations meant to force others into compromising positions. Then he would step back and express concern for the victims of the events he had deliberately created. His trickery was so clever that observers often failed to see his hand in the destruction. 9. John Malkovich, the bossy artist. John Malkovich's reputation as a serious, dedicated artist gave him cover for behavior Eastwood wrote about as selfish and damaging. Malkovich would demand total agreement with his way of playing roles. He dismissed other suggestions as proof of less intelligent artistic understanding. Eastwood recorded times when Malkovich verbally insulted co-stars' performances. He suggested they were ruining the whole movie because they were incompetent. Malkovich's need for perfection went into sadistic territory. He would demand that scenes be repeated dozens of times. This was not to be artistically excellent, but to tire out and break the spirit of his scene partners. He created environments of such strong mental pressure that actors reported trembling before scenes with him. Besides being mean on set, Malkovich planned to ruin reputations through industry gossip. He would selectively share unflattering stories about rivals with reporters and movie bosses. He would carefully present them as caring observations rather than mean rumors. His status and credibility made these attacks especially hurtful. This was because people naturally assumed his inside view must be true. Eastwood noted that Malkovich used the idea of artistic integrity as a weapon. Any criticism of his behavior became a reason to suggest that his critics lacked artistic understanding. He presented himself as uncompromising in his commitment to excellence. He turned his cruelty into a good quality and his victims' pain into a necessary sacrifice for art. 10. Paul Newman, the gentleman's dark side. Paul Newman's image as a principled, thoughtful actor provided perfect camouflage for what Eastwood wrote about: cold, planned exploitation. Newman maintained strict levels of importance on set based on perceived talent levels. He treated those he thought were beneath him with purposeful coldness and dismissal. Eastwood saw Newman deliberately exclude certain actors from social gatherings on set. He created social isolation meant to show them they were unimportant. Newman's cruelty was so clever that it looked almost accidental to people watching. When someone called him out, he could express hurt surprise. He suggested he had never meant to offend, making his victims question whether they had misunderstood his behavior. Eastwood wrote about Newman's special talent for using his charm like a weapon. He would make planned kind gestures toward individuals he was simultaneously ruining professionally. This created confusion in his victims. They wondered if his public warmth meant true friendship or calculated manipulation. Newman also used his charity work reputation as a shield against being held responsible. When questions arose about how he treated coworkers, his charitable work would be brought up as proof of his fundamental goodness. This suggested that accusations must be exaggerated or false. Eastwood noted that Newman understood how to build a public image that would be nearly impossible to argue against. His image as a decent, principled person was so carefully maintained and so widely believed that contradiction was almost impossible. His victims found themselves unable to speak because no one would believe their stories over the established reputation. 11. Steve McQueen, the bossy abuser. Steve McQueen's presence on screen was undeniable, but Eastwood's notes show a man whose obsessive need to control destroyed everyone around him. McQueen would dictate not only his acting, but every small detail of the production around him. This included the lighting, the camera positions, and the clothing worn by other actors. When colleagues disagreed with his commands, McQueen would see these disagreements as personal betrayals. He would respond with cold fury. Eastwood recorded times when McQueen punished crew members for small mistakes. He did this by deliberately ruining morale on set. He created hostile environments meant to break spirits and force people to obey. McQueen's obsession with control included explicit threats. He would warn movie bosses and directors that continuing to work with certain individuals would result in him quitting the projects. These threats were taken seriously because of his drawing power at the box office. This effectively gave him veto power over hiring decisions. McQueen also had abusive relationships with romantic partners and family. He used the same obsessive control he used professionally. Eastwood wrote that people who worked with McQueen always reported psychological damage. They described feelings of constant anxiety and self-doubt that lasted long after the work relationship ended. Eastwood noted that McQueen seemed to feel the presence of others as inherently threatening. His need to control every aspect of his environment was not limited to work worries. It was a fundamental characteristic of how he dealt with the world. A pathological need to dominate that extended to everyone unfortunate enough to depend on him. 12. Burt Reynolds, the flirty predator. Burt Reynolds created a persona as an irresistible ladies' man and good old boy. Yet this image hid predatory behavior that Eastwood documented extensively. Reynolds would deliberately target young, ambitious actresses. He presented himself as a helpful force in their careers. Meanwhile, he was systematically pressuring them for sexual favors. Eastwood recorded that Reynolds had a particular cruelty toward actresses who said no to his advances. He would ensure their careers stalled. He spread rumors about their professional difficulties. He suggested their lack of success was due to their limited talent rather than his deliberate sabotage. Reynolds's predatory behavior extended to those within his immediate professional circle. He would create environments where sexual harassment was normal. Complaints were treated as career-threatening challenges to his authority. They were not legitimate grievances. Eastwood wrote that Reynolds would often pair his harassment with public displays of charm. This made victims' accounts seem implausible when they surfaced. His defenders would point to his charity work and public persona as evidence that accusations must be false. This effectively silenced his victims through attacks on their reputation. Eastwood noted that Reynolds's particular talent was his ability to appear genuinely bewildered when accusations surfaced. He would respond with confusion. He suggested his accusers had misinterpreted his friendly behavior or had misremembered interactions. This feigned innocence was particularly effective against victims who already doubted their own perceptions. 13. Robert Redford, the controlling perfectionist. Robert Redford's image as a thoughtful artistic actor conceals what Eastwood saw as systematic manipulation of everyone involved in his projects. Redford maintained impossible standards that he applied inconsistently. The way he applied them depended on his personal feelings toward crew members and co-stars. Eastwood wrote how Redford would praise work he privately considered inadequate. Then, at crucial moments, he would suggest that the worker had failed to meet standards. This destroyed their confidence and made them vulnerable to further manipulation. Redford's perfectionism served as cover for deliberate cruelty. He would demand rewrites of scripts days before filming. This forced writers into impossible situations. Then he would publicly criticize their work when time pressure resulted in less polished writing. He created circumstances designed to guarantee failure. Then he positioned himself as blameless in the inevitable shortcomings. Eastwood recorded that Redford's particular talent lay in making people question their own competence and value. He would suggest that collaboration with him was a gift. He suggested that their presence in his projects should be gratitude enough. He suggested that complaints about his treatment showed ingratitude and professional immaturity. His victims often internalized his suggestions. They blamed themselves for their anxiety and distress. Eastwood noted that Redford's methods were designed to create permanent psychological damage. He understood that by making people doubt their own competence, he made them vulnerable to future manipulation. His projects left behind damaged professionals who questioned every subsequent decision they made. 14. James Coburn, the old guy who took advantage. James Coburn's long career gave him many chances to perfect what Eastwood wrote about: sophisticated exploitation of younger talent and vulnerable crew members. Coburn would present himself as an elder statesman, offering guidance. Then, he would use that position of trust to get favors and obedience from those grateful for his mentorship. Eastwood recorded how Coburn would offer invaluable advice. At the same time, he was creating dependencies that made people feel they owed him unlimited loyalty and assistance. Coburn's exploitation extended to conscious abuse of his veteran status. He would make demands that younger actors and crew members felt unable to refuse. He presented objections as ingratitude toward an established figure. When these demands resulted in exhaustion or emotional damage, Coburn would suggest that ambitious people in the industry expected such sacrifices. Eastwood documented one particular incident where Coburn convinced a young actress that her career depended entirely on her willingness to accept his demands. He created a coercive situation from which she felt unable to escape. Coburn's greatest talent lay in making exploitation feel like opportunity. He transformed abuse into something his victims might actually feel fortunate to experience. Eastwood noted that Coburn maintained an almost fatherly facade. This made his exploitation particularly devastating. His victims felt grateful to him even as he extracted everything of value from their effort and creativity. He left them drained and psychologically damaged, while convinced they should be thankful for the experience. These are the names that Clint Eastwood kept secret, the proof he wrote down of Hollywood's darkest secrets, names that represented not just individual failures of character. They represented systemic cruelty that grew strong because powerful people protected each other. Because staying quiet and helping the bad guys was more important than having a conscience.